Hey everyone, welcome to episode 112 of the Sleep Whisperer podcast, and I'm speaking with my dear friend Robyn Spens. Robyn is a clinical hypnotherapist, functional nutrition and lifestyle practitioner, and therapeutic coach. She helps highly functioning people to successfully stop over-drinking. The clients who work with her are aware of the impact that alcohol is having on their lives but still struggle to change this habit. Through her training and research as a functional nutrition practitioner, clinical hypnotherapist and coach, she developed a method to break her own over-drinking habit rooted in cognitive therapy and neuroscience. This has transformed her desire and her relationship with alcohol. If you want to stop overdrinking and have a desire to show up strong in your life regardless of the challenges, then discover your perfect accountability partner. What's the difference between addiction and overdrinking, and why do we overdrink? How does overdrinking affect your sleep, and how do we use overdrinking as ways to escape from our emotions? This is a powerful conversation, one that we might find ourselves grappling with the truth while trying to remain in denial. Robyn is my dear friend, and I'm thrilled that we were able to bring this conversation to you, one that you might need or find that someone very close to you does. When it comes to alcohol, it is truly a very important piece of the health puzzle. In many cases, it's the reason that someone does not move the health needle, even while being so on point with food and movement. This conversation is one where we invite you to come away from being the ostrich in denial and embrace the possibility of the greater change which might await you on the other side of understanding alcohol at the very core of your life. Take a listen and may it speak volumes to you. Hey everyone, I'm Deepa, Light Functional Medicine Practitioner, author and yogini, and you're listening to the Sleep Whisperer podcast, the only sleep podcast with conversations and meditations. I'm on a mission to share profoundly insightful sleep conversations with global visionaries that merge together functional medicine and ancient wisdom. Breathe in bliss through weekly guided meditations and let yourself enter the land of dreams. Together, let's unravel the pieces, get to the roots, and understand the right tools to transform your sleep completely. Through this podcast, I want you to dream the best version of yourself. It's time to regain hope and begin your sleep journey. Robyn, welcome to the Sleep Whisperer podcast, and I know that this is a conversation that I've really wanted to go into and explore, but I was so lucky when you suggested this, and I know that you're really in the right space. As you mentioned to me before we started the conversation, that there's a huge gap between addiction and sobriety, and actually that's the space I feel is the most realistic one, because we want to be able to probably include, and alcohol is related in many ways to community and society and socializing. So that's the mindset that a lot of people also suggest to me. But somewhere I think the missing link becomes that it tips over into over drinking, binge drinking, and maybe several forms of addiction as well. And the other belief, Robyn, which I've discussed a little bit in several episodes, is that there is the belief that alcohol helps people to sleep, and there are people who actually tell some of my clients who are struggling to work through sleep challenges that
I've been for the last 10 years drinking alcohol and taking a sleeping pill, and I've had no sleep challenges. And I think that casual approach is also a little concerning, given that there are a lot of people who are genuinely trying to piece together why they're not sleeping well. So before we go into actually the sleep part of it, could we first explore the nuances here? So what is binge drinking? What is over drinking? Where is it tipping over into addiction? So if you could just throw some light on that so people can actually resonate with where they are lying at the moment.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think for myself, my alcohol stories maybe started in my late 20s. And, I loved good wine. I discovered good wine. I love wine. I love to drink wine. I love to pair wine with food. And then I started to study wine. And I found, as I moved into my professional career, that wine and alcohol became something else to me. It became, the thing that put me to sleep. It became the problem solver when I was stressed. And my relationship with alcohol changed dramatically because it became something that I was emotionally attached to. So certainly, in the last 10 years, what I've discovered about myself is that, my body could no longer handle the effect of alcohol. And so, the question for me is, I had to look at what my relationship was with alcohol. And my relationship was that, I wasn't addicted. But I overdrank, and I overdrank because alcohol was a solution to certain problems. But I didn't understand where the desire was coming from. What was compelling me to overdrink? What was fueling my relationship with alcohol? And I think that's where a lot of people become confused because they think, oh, what is addiction and what is overdrinking? So I think what happens is when you start to drink alcohol, you get this kind of influx of dopamine, this huge kind of influx of dopamine, and your brain starts trying to accommodate that influx. And then something happens, so your brain starts to accommodate this influx of dopamine, but the brain then down regulates how the dopamine receptors affect you, meaning that it takes more alcohol to feel the same way that you did. And the more you repeat that cycle, the stronger it becomes. And then you start to prioritize drinking because the brain starts to prioritize having that dopamine hit. And so then you move that, 20, 50 paces, and that moves you into complete addiction when alcohol becomes the only thing that you think about. It becomes the priority in your life. Now, over drinking is someone who is highly functioning, pretty much got their life together, but at weekends and at different times, they drink more than they attend, and more than they have thought they would. They drink more than they thought about. And so over drinking, you will see binge drinkers who drink only at the weekend, or people who go out and say, I'm just going to have dinner and a couple of drinks. And they end up having scotches to unwind. And then they end up having more than they intended. So that's the overdrinker, is someone who wants to wrestle back control of the amount that they drink.
And I think that's, Robyn, I see this a lot. What you just described was something that I hear constantly. And just a few weeks ago, there was somebody who said to me that there was also, I think it's sometimes associated with certain events. So, for example, if someone is looking forward to a birthday or an anniversary or celebrating a professional success, sometimes they've they do relate that the binge drinking is a way to celebrate that. And so they've already prepared themselves for that in terms of mentally readying for that event. And I think somewhere then that starts to become a pattern, because at all points in time, certain events are associated with the same set of consequences. And they do realize that they feel terrible the next few days, but somewhere they're caught in that loop and they don't know really how to break free from that. And I don't think they're even in a space where they feel they need to break free of that. So if you could just tell us about what actually goes on in terms of, you did describe how it's a lot like sugar, where allowing for that dopamine release, and then it becomes a kind of a addiction from which you can't fall out of. But what is the reason that we can tell people that they might need to change this?
Yeah, that's an interesting, a beautiful question in terms of how we're socialized to think that when we go to events, certainly weddings and alcohol go hand in hand, that I have to overdrink. And so there's almost this socialization around, when I go to a big event, I'm expected to drink. Therefore, because I'm expected, I do. And certainly when I used to drink a lot, I would go to a wedding and think, I'm just going because I know I'm going to have a great time and drink champagne and have an opportunity to dance. It never crossed my mind to say no. It never crossed my mind to say, I'm going to only have one. So it's almost when our brain expects certain things in a situation, we don't disappoint. So why do we overdrink? Why do we overdrink in social situations? Because there is an expectation that we're going to do it. Now, if I say no, thank you, people ask me, why don't you want to drink? Why aren't you having a drink? Why aren't you having dessert? But if I say no, thank you to a glass of water, there's silence. Or broccoli. No one ever says, why don't you want broccoli? But with drinking, why? So we have to train our brain to just resist and say no. But let's talk about why we overdrink. We overdrink because we've taught our brains to over-desire alcohol. And we over-desire alcohol because alcohol we programmed ourselves to over-desire it. And we've programmed ourselves to over-desire a lot of things like food, gambling, shopping, scrolling. In this day and age, the satiety levels are very high. We can never say no. And so we've almost taught our brain to over-desire things. And so that's why we overdrink, because we over-desire alcohol. So what is over-desire? Over-desire is just an urgent desire. It's an urge. And it's an urge, a desire that's become urgent. So the more we drink, the more we want to drink. And then we teach our brain that alcohol solves things. So at the wedding, when people are saying, why don't you want to drink? You drink because it stops people asking you. It solves a problem in that moment. So alcohol use is sometimes tied to emotion. When we feel stressed, we might have a glass of wine or a scotch at the end of the night. When we feel sad, we might have a glass of wine to cheer us up. So alcohol becomes the thing that stops us sometimes from feeling emotion.
Oh, I love that. I actually want you to go a little bit deeper into that, because describe that, because that's a beautiful thing that actually popped in my head a few days ago when someone described the binge drinking that he was looking forward to very soon because of some event coming up in his life. And that's the first thing that popped in my head, that it's almost as if it's a way to forget about what is he experiencing. And I knew him personally, so I felt that he was trying to numb something with that. So can we just go a little deeper into that? Because that's really important.
Yeah, we call that buffering with alcohol, using alcohol as a way to escape our feelings. And then alcohol becomes the tool that we use to feel better. And so, going back to one of my clients who went to a wedding, we had prepared, and she had done a what we call a drink plan, that she was only going to have 2 glasses of champagne. But in that moment, she felt really sorry for herself because she was not able to go with anybody and she was unattached. And when she arrived at the wedding, she felt really sad. And so that's through that sadness, she drank and she drank and she drank. And then the next day, she was really horrified and upset with herself because she hadn't kept her promise to herself. So sometimes we use alcohol to buffer. And what I mean by buffering, instead of feeling the emotion, instead of feeling the sadness, instead of feeling the loneliness, we have a drink to cover up that feeling, or it enables us to endure the feeling.
And I think, Robyn, I can almost hear some of my dear friends and clients telling me, in answer to what you just said, that who wants to feel sad, who wants to feel lonely? So if there's a way that we can actually cover that up, what's wrong with it? Why should we put ourselves through that misery? What would we say to that?
Okay, that's an interesting question, because who wants to feel misery? Who wants to feel pain? But feeling misery sometimes is part of the human condition. You know, we wouldn't know sadness if we didn't know joy. We wouldn't know loneliness if we didn't know community. And so having both of those sides of the equation is the human condition. We have to know one without the other. And listen, life is the 50-50. 50% of the time, we're going to feel great. And 50% of the time, we're going to have things that happen in our lives. That's life. But when we can allow emotion instead of resisting or reacting, then we become stronger and a better version of ourselves. You know, when we can allow ourselves to feel the loneliness and not pick up a drink, to feel the sadness and not drink, that makes us stronger. And that doesn't mean that the loneliness is going to last forever. It's just a feeling, and it moves through your body, and then you release it. It's just a sensation in your body. That's all emotion is. And when we can allow our emotions, then we allow ourselves to control our ability to manage alcohol. We get to manage alcohol. Now, listen, some people use not only alcohol, they use food in the same way. When I feel sad, I eat cake. I have a lot of clients like that. And you can use these same tools of allowing yourself to sit through the emotion, to reflect on what's happening. What's happening to your brain when you feel sad? Is it telling you, oh, you don't want to feel this? Go and have a drink so you can feel better. Go and have a piece of cake so you can feel better. That's what your little brain is telling you. So you just sit with that and allow yourself to feel the emotion. And then the emotion moves through you. But when we allow ourselves to drink because of the emotion, every time we feel that emotion, we pick up a glass of wine or a glass of champagne, because that becomes the problem that we're solving. And then we need that glass of wine when we feel the emotion. It's like, I've had a bad day. I need a glass of wine. So when we start to use the words need, then that means I need to resolve that problem.
I love it, Robyn. In fact, I was just going to ask you, where does it tip over into addiction, and what does addiction look like? Because, you know, the typical answer is always that I'm not addicted. I can stop anytime I want. And I've heard this a lot. I've also lived with an alcoholic long ago, and I've seen so much of this, but I would love for you to actually describe what does addiction look like.
Well, I don't work with addicts. I do refer them on to either a 12-step program or some other program which can accommodate them. But addiction looks like someone who prioritizes alcohol over everything else in their life, and they cannot stop drinking. And that addiction can spiral very much out of control. And for someone who's addicted, they do need support and help pulling that back. And you cannot go from addiction to sobriety in one fell swoop. It's almost dangerous to do that when you are drinking heavily every day. It has to be a graduated thing. So my work is really with people who overdrink, who are highly functioning, but they know that they're not keeping their promise to themselves or their intention when alcohol is around. And they're also drinking because of emotional drinking. They're drinking because there is an emotion, and that emotion is compelling them to drink alcohol to feel better. So what we focus on is changing the emotion. And when you can change the emotion, then that gives you more agency and more power over how and when you want to drink.
That's right. So I think I loved what you described about the drink plan, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that with you later. But how does alcohol impact sleep? Because there is, as I said, this common misconception that alcohol is great, and most people believe that it helps them to sleep easily and stay asleep. And I've also heard one thing which I would like your thoughts on, which is that some people have told me alcohol is not a sugar. So I'd love for you to actually break this down as well.
Well, I'll tackle that one first. As far as I know, most wine and there are many sugars and under many different names in alcohol. I think probably the substance that has the least amount of sugar is red wine. But white wine, champagne, a lot of spirits are full of sugar. If we think about rum is made from sugar cane. So depending on your choice of spirits, you will find some sort of alcohol either in the alcohol directly or in the process. So let's get on to sleep. I think a lot of the people I work with discover that all of a sudden, they've been drinking and drink has fueled their sleep. And what I mean by that, they think they sleep better because of alcohol. But then they're finding that they're waking up at 2, 3 in the morning. It knocks them out early on, and then they're wide awake at 2, 3 in the morning. And that's because your body is attempting to detox that alcohol. And that's why that's happening. And as we get older, those 2 or 3 glasses of wine that made us feel incredibly good start other habits. Like we start looking in the fridge for food. All of a sudden, we're hungry again. And, we're not sleeping well, or we're having, sort of nuances in our hormonal health. And then we find that those 2 glasses of wine or 4 glasses of wine that used to help us sleep is now waking us up. So what's going on here? So what's happening is your body is no longer able to tolerate that alcohol. And when I speak to my clients about cutting back, they say, no, I don't want to cut back. I'm willing to do everything else but cut back on alcohol because alcohol helps me sleep. And when I stop drinking, my sleep's disrupted. What's happening? And what's happening is that their body is going through that kind of detox and their sleep is disrupted. But the further you go into cutting down the amount that you drink, the easier it gets. And some people feel they need alcohol because, I really need it because I've got insomnia. I can't sleep. And it's because your body doesn't know how to sleep without it. And you're retraining your body And that means developing a good sleep hygiene, which is something I'm sure you talk about all the time. Deepa is, developing a good sleep hygiene. So when your body is used to going to sleep with alcohol, you have to train your brain and your body that it doesn't need alcohol in order to sleep. And that's where having a good sleep hygiene program comes into play.
I think, Robyn, what you described also took my mind to those who are trying to come off sleeping pills. And it sounds so familiar in terms of, we did an episode with Dr. Nishi Bhopal, who spoke about weaning off from sleeping medication. And she also described it like this, that it needs to be done so gently, because right now your body's forgotten how to sleep without that. And you did describe also about how that makes you sometimes reach for food at strange times of the night. It could also be that at times people don't prioritize food along with the alcohol that they drink in the night. So is there I suppose we'll come to that later, but just as what is the right way to enjoy a drink with food, but maybe we'll save that for later. I would like us to jump into whether alcohol affects women differently, because that is something that I see a lot. And there are two aspects to this, Robyn. The first is there a specific phase of a menstrual cycle where women tend to crave more alcohol and also cannot metabolize it as well? Maybe, I'm not sure, I'm just thinking out loud. And is it very different on women as compared to men?
I think alcohol does have a different effect on women than it does on men. And I think women find it harder to metabolize alcohol in a way that men don't. And I think that's to do with our reproductive system. And so women do find alcohol harder to metabolize. And I think alcohol can impact fertility. Women who are thinking about starting their fertility journey, I think, need to think about how they want to reduce their intake of alcohol prior to that. I think it's disruptive to the cycle. And I think it has a huge impact on conception with both sexes. I think some women and men feel that alcohol is an enhancer. But I think, while one drink doesn't reflect, one drink doesn't affect blood flow, heavy drinking does. And it can affect, how people are intimate with each other. And it can affect men in many different ways. And it can affect women, because alcohol does have an impact on your behavioral, your cognitive part of your brain. And sometimes it can stop women from being able to, it can impact the fertility cycle. And for men, in terms of being able to produce enough of what they need to produce to fertilize an egg, it can have an impact on that. Absolutely.
And I think, could you also break that down? I mean, you did describe in terms of fertility, but the common thing that you also come across is where people believe that they feel that intimacy becomes easier when they've had a glass of wine. This is something common. So this is something, not necessarily if someone is trying to have a baby or anything, but how is this then creating a loop where intimacy relies on alcohol?
Yes, this is a really interesting one. And if a lot of women have shared with me that they drink in order to become intimate, and men and women equally. With men, it's about bravado and, being able to relax and do the thing that's expected of them. And for a lot of young men who feel nervous, this can be something that they use to feel, more relaxed. For women, it can be used in a way to shed inhibition. And so alcohol on both sides of the coin is, people feel that this is something that relaxes me. One drink may do that. But if you continually overdrink in order to become intimate, then you rely on that. Your brain relies on it. Your body relies on it to feel relaxed. And when you're feeling so relaxed, it can restrict blood flow in men. So they're not able to become erect. It can depress the nervous system. And it can, decrease flow into their penis. And so, therefore, the thing that they're using to feel relaxed can disrupt their ability to become intimate, to have an orgasm, and that can happen to women as well. So, alcohol seems like a relaxant, but it can produce anorgasmia.
And I think, Robyn, something my husband and I have discussed a lot is also that at times people use alcohol when there's a reason why they're actually unable to have healthy intimacy with their partner. Maybe one has just lost interest, moved on, and so they're not able to even venture down that road, and then they start to use alcohol as something to forget the fact that they cannot be intimate. Is that also something that you feel is a possibility?
Oh, absolutely. Using alcohol because, maybe they've had a bad experience or they're inexperienced, as a way of feeling better about the experience. Also as a way of just being there, but not being present in the experience. And I see that happens a lot with many people. And so, and people make really silly mistakes sometimes, when they're, have had too much alcohol, so it creates a place where they might do things they wouldn't necessarily do if they had not overdrank. And so I very measured with alcohol and exploring intimacy and being very present, I think is perhaps a better way to enter into this, especially for younger people. I think being present and being what I call sober sex, being able to be intimate without alcohol. And being present in that rather than using alcohol as a way to be intimate. Because a lot of times, for many couples, they've never been present. They've never been sober. Alcohol is what they use to get into the mood of intimacy. And then that becomes a habit and they don't know how to be intimate without it.
I love that phrase, sober sex, Robyn. I think it encapsulates so much meaning within that itself. But let's actually talk about how does someone move past a habit of over drinking or binge drinking and this oscillating between weekdays and weekends, and where do they begin? And of course, we are talking about not complete sobriety. As we mentioned in the beginning, we're going into that space between over drinking and sobriety where reality lies.
Yeah, and it's changing a habit. Over drinking is a habit. When we overdrink to solve something, our brain almost, it becomes second nature to us. So, it starts in the prefrontal cortex, that we're thinking about, I'm over drinking because of this. And then it becomes a habit. It drops down into what I call our animal brain. And then we're doing it automatically. So how do we change that over drinking habit? So I think there are four different things that we can do when an urge to overdrink appears. You can react, of course, and pour yourself a drink and say yes to the urge. You can resist by using willpower, which a lot of us do. I'm just going to resist and not have that drink. But willpower doesn't work. At some point, we give in. And so, or we distract ourselves by, turning to another activity. We're going to shop or scroll and not have the drink, or we eat, or we can simply feel the emotion and sensation. Let it pass through us. Let the little brain say, have that drink, and we don't react. And the more that we do that, the more empowered we become to change our relationship with alcohol. And that might be having a drink plan. And a drink plan may look like, I plan out my drinking for a week. On Friday, I'm going to a dinner with friends. I'm going to have 2 glasses of wine. On Saturday, I'm going to a wedding. I'm going to have a glass of wine. On Sunday, I'm having a family dinner. I'm not going to drink. But you plan it out ahead of time. And that's where you're making a commitment to yourself to not to drink or to have only a glass. And what you're teaching your brain is that it doesn't have to have that immediate gratification. I want, therefore I drink. I want, therefore I eat. That's where most of us are. I want, therefore I scroll and shop. And we have to teach our brains to wait. And so a drink plan is all about waiting. I have a plan, I wait, I execute the plan. If I want more, then it goes on the next day's plan. But when we pause and we teach our brain how to wait, then we're building up a different habit. And sometimes when the thing that we think we want, when we wait, we find out we don't really want it. But most of us drink because we're in habit mode. And when we disrupt the habit, we find that we get much more management or agency over when and how we drink. And that can start with a drink plan.
And would it also be logical, Robyn, to have as part of the drink plan, because sociological pressures are so high that that's, you described it yourself at the start, where someone's egging us on, and why just one drink, why not some more? I mean, we're here to have fun. So what is part of the plan in terms of managing these social situations?
Yeah, that's a great question. So sometimes I work with my clients and doing hypnotherapy with them, getting them into those situations where they see themselves in a social situation and they derive pleasure from saying no. And it's learning to say no, and learning that you don't have to people please by saying yes. Because when we say yes to other people, we're saying no to ourselves. And it's saying no, learning to say no. It's like, no, thank you. I don't want to drink. And just watching yourself in that situation. And your brain's going to say, have the drink. It's easier. It's easier. It makes other people happy. And I just sit there and I observe myself saying no. And I say no. Now, listen, that was pretty hard at first because my husband and I loved pairing food and wine. And now I'm not drinking. And he finds it very uncomfortable. So it's his discomfort that's compelling him to say, why not? It's his discomfort around me saying, no, thank you. So I have to sit in my own discomfort and say, no, I'm not choosing to drink right now. And at first, that was hard. That was really easy. I was out with friends. I'm here in London, friends from the US last night, and I didn't drink. And they were saying, oh, you're not drinking anymore? And I'm like, I just don't want to drink tonight. I just don't fancy it. And they were all really uncomfortable. But you know what? They forgot in 5 minutes. And they had a lovely time, and they had wine, and I drank water. And I was perfectly happy with that. but it takes practice. Practice saying no. Feel the discomfort and say no anyway. And that way, I'm keeping my commitment to myself. It's like going out for a run. The first 3 weeks, you go every day. Then you start saying, oh, it's raining. I'm not going to go. Oh, I'm tired. I'm not going to go. And we stop keeping our promises to ourselves. And that's a muscle that we have to strengthen. The more you say no, the more it feels good to say no. So it's a muscle.
There was something very insightful you described in that situation, Robyn, where you said, I just said I'm not drinking today. So, that also takes the pressure off of you in social situations where you're not going there and announcing, I'm not drinking again. You're just saying, I'm not drinking today. And I think that makes a world of difference in terms of pressuring yourself and inflicting that pressure on anybody else and getting them to push you. I think there's a really big difference between the two. Most often you see people who say, okay, I'm never again going to drink, and then they enter a social situation and then they're telling everybody, I'm not drinking after today, and then eventually the pressure mounts, and then it's like what you described, the journey has to be slow and not abrupt, because then it just probably has a greater chance of recoiling back on them. Is there anything that you'd like to share in terms of final words of advice?
Yeah, I think you have to think of your brain if you want to move into the world of exploring how to say no and changing the habit of why you drink. Some of you can't have this waste my drinking. Your brain's going to have a tantrum and say, why are you doing this to me? I want my glass of wine. Just allow it to have gently and firmly say, I'm to this new language, waiting. I'm not going to have that today. So we're retraining our brains. We're retraining our brains to, not have that intensity of whatever I want, I have to have right now. And I think this is a beautiful skill for overeating and over drinking. So just know your brain's going to push back, but just allow it to. And sit in that peace of listening to the chatter and still say no. And I think that's one of the things that's made it really, really easy for me to move through this challenge and to develop a program for the challenge.
So we have our guests complete our show mantra, Robyn. So if sleep is the new medicine, then how would Robyn complete that for us?
That's an interesting one. If sleep is the new medicine, I think learning to say no is the perfect companion.
Oh, it's lovely. Where can people find you, Robyn? Because you did describe your program. So where can people go if they'd like to? And I'm presuming your program, you actually walk people through step-by-step ways to move away from over drinking.
Yeah, they can find me at robynspens.com. Yes, I work with people one-to-one, and I work with them in groups to help them become more efficient at managing the amount that they drink and when they drink, and helping them to get some agency over that. I also work with people who where drink has interfered or caused difficulty in their ability to have become fertile and with fertility issues. So that's also a place that we look at managing your intake and reducing your intake and stopping your intake before you think about conceiving.
Beautiful, Robyn. It was a great conversation. What I really took away and what I liked in this conversation was just that it was very realistic. It wasn't something like do or die, and it was somewhere right in that middle, which gives people a feeling that it's possible. It's not something that's completely out of their grasp. So thank you for sharing your time with us and all these wise words, and I'm sure people can reach you if they want to know more.
Thank you so much. It's been a delight to speak with you, Deepa. Thank you for having me.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed the show. Just a reminder that this podcast is for information purposes only. This is not a substitute for professional care by a doctor or otherwise qualified health professional. This information is provided on the understanding that it does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. If you are looking for personal help on your health journey, do seek out a medical practitioner. Please do make your own healthcare decisions based upon your research and in partnership with your doctor or otherwise qualified healthcare professional. It is in no way intended as medical advice, as a substitute for medical counseling, or as treatment or cure for any particular health condition. Be sure to always work directly with a qualified health practitioner before making any changes to your diet or lifestyle that may feel out of your realm of comfort or understanding. If you are looking for an allied functional medicine practitioner, do seek out more information on www.phytothrive.com. It is important that you have someone who is qualified and understands your health personally in order to provide adequate care, especially when it comes to chronic health conditions.